Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast. Using my sportscasting background, I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players to gain more insight on what makes this team go. As the Detroit Lions enter a new gritty era, we'll look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In today's episode, we're having a discussion on the upcoming NFL draft. A little extra add-on to the episode from earlier in the week, revisiting the possible picks we want to see, we want to be avoided, and what we think the Lions might actually be doing. I'm joined today by James Cook, senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. You can also hear him on the Get Around podcast. It drops on Mondays. Great to have you here, James.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, man.
You know, I really wanted to do this extra episode because you and we have dove deep in the past about the roster, the talent that was in the free agency pool, and stuff coming out in the draft. And, you know, I really need to have your input before draft day happens, and that's right here, right now. So we started with the fun stuff. Talk about what we wanted to have happen in the draft. That first pick, the Lions are at number 6. If you are the GM of Detroit, what would you love to have happen?
I guess the best case scenario for the Lions would be 4 quarterbacks to go in the first 5 picks. I don't think that's going to happen necessarily, but, then they're sitting there at 6. I mean, it wouldn't be bad if 3 quarterbacks go in the first 5 picks.
3 would be amazing.
3 would be probably maybe the best scenario, because then you've got maybe a team that wants one of those, that 4th quarterback, because there's a big drop off between those top 4 and the next quarterback, who is probably Hendon Hooker.
Yep.
And so then maybe you have somebody like maybe, say, Atlanta, who says we want to jump up ahead of Las Vegas, who also may be in the market for a quarterback. And, Lions could trade back 2 picks, maybe pick up a 2nd or a 3rd and something else, and pick up some extra picks, still get a player that I think fits into what they want or need, and pick up some extra picks. I think they would do that in a heartbeat if the opportunity presents itself. Whether it presents itself, I don't know, but and there's suddenly become questions about some of those other guys that'll be there at 6, because Will Anderson is probably not going to be there. He's the only guy I think for sure, other than the quarterbacks, that's going to go in the top 5. And then after that, you've got Tyree Wilson and Jalen Carter. Both are guys that would fit needs for the Lions on the defensive line, but also both have big questions. Carter with, some red flags, some legal issues and stuff, and his pro day wasn't great.
Right.
And then Tyree Wilson, just reports coming out fairly recently that he has a Liz Frank injury on his foot, which is a big red flag, because those injuries can linger for a long time.
Yes, they can, and they can definitely affect your play and development, and then even slow down the process of which you make an impact with the team.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, they require surgery. Apparently, he's already had surgery, and but it looks like the depending on the severity of what they had to do in the surgery, the rehab and stuff could lead into the season.
Well, it's interesting. My ideal situation actually is the same. I would love the Lions to somehow be able to trade back just a few spots, but in that scenario, somehow still get a guy like Devin Witherspoon from Illinois. Now, with the Raiders picking right behind Detroit, and I think there's another team that needs a defensive back right behind them, Witherspoon might not be there. But I love the idea of just trading back a little bit. Of those 3 guys you named up front on the defensive line, I think we all agree Will Anderson would be the amazing guy to get, but you probably have to trade up to get him, and I'm not so sure I want to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Brad Holmes did that last year to get Jamison Williams, but I don't know how much he's going to be wanting to trade up. The Lions have some extra picks this year, but it's not like they're, sitting on just a boatload of draft picks.
So if there's one player to come away with at the 6, 7, 8 pick spot, who is it that you would like to see become a Detroit Lion?
I'd be Christian Gonzalez or Devin Witherspoon, like you mentioned, at corner would both be good fits. Jalen Carter fits the need if the Lions are comfortable with him. I just have a hunch that he's a no, that they're going to kind of pass on him.
Well, one thing I've heard is maybe his work ethic might actually be a question mark too. Yeah. And that seems to kind of be the opposite of what the Lions want.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and there's other guys who maybe don't have quite as much pure talent as Jalen Carter, but don't have the other question marks and some other things that you can get a little bit later in the draft and basically get almost the same kind of player. Guys like Kalijah Kancey, the defensive end from Northwestern.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take a chance on pronouncing his name. So there's some guys that at 18 you could maybe get that are almost the same as a Carter, or even maybe a little bit later with that second round pick the Lions have.
So if we are later in the first round, that second pick, there's been a lot of talk. The Lions are already asking people who might be interested in moving up to it. The Lions might want to move back from 18, but let's just say they stay at 18 or right around that spot. Who's someone you like later in the first round?
I think that if Bijan Robinson is still there at 18, that the Lions will look long and hard at him. I just think that having, they signed David Montgomery to a 3-year contract. If you draft Robinson in the first round, you get him for 5 years if you want. And just having that pairing of running backs with the fact that the Lions love to run the ball and want to run the ball and be able to just grind the clock down in second halves if they have the lead, that would be just a great pairing at running back.
It's funny. It seems that Bijan Robinson is a fan favorite already. I'm in love with him. Other people I've talked to are like, oh my goodness, if we could add a guy like this to our offense, it would be great. We obviously know the debate about whether you grab a running back in the first round or not. Are we better off having a defensive tackle and a defensive back in the first round versus taking a running back? But the talent level of Bijan Robinson seems to be a very unique skill set, and it seems like he could take our offense to a different level. I honestly don't even know if he'll be there at 18. I don't think he will be.
I'm not sure that he will be either. I think, he's the darling of the draft so far, like the name that people are talking about most, I think, other than the quarterbacks at this point. And the reason why they're talking about the quarterbacks is they're debating which one of them are good or not. With Bijan Robinson, it is almost near unanimous that he is head and shoulders the best running back in this draft and maybe in several drafts. But you've also got now maybe the need for another receiver. And there's going to be some pretty decent ones there at 18. I've seen some mocks even have Dalton Kincaid, the tight end, to the Lions at 18. And I think that's a little high. I don't think the Lions will go tight end.
Well, and it's a very deep class for tight ends. You can get a quality guy in the second round, maybe even the third.
Yeah. It is a pretty good deep draft at tight end. It's one of the deeper positions, I think, overall in the draft. I mean, you're looking at guys like, Schoonmaker from Michigan is somebody who you're looking at third round, maybe. I mean, I've seen some mocks have him in the second, but a lot with the third and fourth round. And I think he'll be a solid NFL tight end.
Well, I don't know if he'll last to the middle of the second round, but Darnell Washington out of Georgia seems prototypical for the Lions. I mentioned this before with his size. That would just be amazing. Now, I don't want them to take one in the first round for sure. I still think James Mitchell has a lot of upside, but I wouldn't be shocked if they took one in the second round and maybe possibly an offensive lineman in the second round. What are some of your second round thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I like James Mitchell's potential too. I mean, I think he's the seam stretcher you need at tight end. He's the guy who can get downfield and actually make big plays at tight end. He's not the greatest blocker in the world, but he's not bad either. So he's not like one of those tight ends who is one-dimensional and tips your hand to what you're doing.
All right, well, let's move on to the middle rounds, rounds 3 and later. What are some spots, maybe even some players that you would like the Lions to address?
There's some guys that are going to be available that I think fit their needs and guys that I think will be a reason why they kind of skip on other positions maybe earlier in the draft. And I think linebacker is really strong in the second round. There's a lot of good linebackers in the second round, so I wouldn't be surprised if they go linebacker there if they want to. But in the third round, you still got guys like, Ivan Pace from Cincinnati. If they don't, because there's only a handful of linebackers I think who are going to go in the second round. If you miss out on those guys, you still can get a guy like Pace. You could still maybe get the running back from Pittsburgh if they don't get Bijan Robinson, and apparently they really like him as well.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense to bring a linebacker in, considering where we are. We don't have a lot of depth at the linebacker position.
Yeah. I mean, behind, those, top 3 guys they got, there's just not a whole lot. Some other guys, there's some pretty good corners in the third round. Like Julius Brents, I think, might be there. Tyreek Stevenson could be there in the third round if they don't get one of those top corners at number 6.
Do you think DJ Turner lasts that long? Third, fourth?
Maybe. maybe third. Yeah. Keanu Benton is another one of those defensive linemen who I think could be, is a scheme fit for them and could be there in the third round. I've seen some mocks where he's kind of creeping up a little bit. I think wide receiver, I think would definitely be in play. Somewhere, I think in the first 4 rounds, they're probably going to take a wide receiver. I think just because they got to have somebody to replace Jameson Williams now for the first 6 games, and it doesn't hurt. I thought they were going to take a wide receiver before for depth.
So did I.
But now it's a little bit more of a need.
Well, I do think that the Lions, like you said, were probably thinking and leaning towards drafting a wide receiver at some point in this draft anyway. Mm-hmm. And Jameson Williams gets the headlines for the suspension, but Quintez Cephas was a depth spot that had a lot of potential who's now completely gone. I do think the Lions will take at least one receiver in the draft. I'm expecting it to be mid to late round still. A guy like Rashee Rice out of SMU could be a good one. There's a few of them out there. I just want them to grab somebody along with a running back. If they don't take Bijan Robinson in the first, I want them to take somebody in rounds 2, 3, or 4, just another talent to add to that running back room. I already think it's pretty solid, but we also want to plan for the future and for contingencies of injuries.
Yeah, and then another linebacker that I forgot to mention before that is a possibility is Penei Sewell's younger brother, Noah, who's like a third-round type linebacker. But yeah, there's a bunch of wide receivers. Nathaniel Dell is another one that I kind of like. He's more like Amon-Ra St. Brown than a lot of other receivers because he was played kind of. People see him as a slot receiver.
Okay.
But I think he can be like that Amon-Ra type player where you can put him wherever.
Well, and then also let me throw a couple other wide receivers out there. I think it's Jalen Reed from Michigan State. He's got some speed. He could be pretty good. And then I don't know if you have an opinion on Dante Demas from Maryland. He was injured 2 years ago with his ACL. He came back last year, had an okay year, but a little lackluster. I think he's a guy that could be found later in the draft and might actually exceed expectations.
Yeah, and those are the kind of players that you've seen that Holmes has looked for late in the draft. Guys like Mitchell last year. They got him way low because he was coming off an ACL. I mean, he was a guy who coming into the draft, had he been healthy and not torn his ACL last year, probably like a 2nd-round pick.
That's a big drop.
And yeah, so he dropped to the 5th. Those are the guys that he looks to find a value on. He tries to find guys late in the draft that other teams are overlooking because of an injury, or other teams are overlooking because of one flaw, maybe that he thinks is not going to matter. Like Rodriguez, if you look at Rodriguez's college's tape, the only flaw in his game was that he was short. At the combine, he wasn't as tall as other guys.
Well, and then you also brought up James Mitchell. If he really had a 2nd-round grade and we got him in the 5th round or 6th round, that tells you the potential that's there for this coming year, which is why it really doesn't seem logical that the Lions would draft a tight end in the 1st round.
No, I think they have one of their definite centerpieces at tight end in James Mitchell. And then Brock Wright proved that he was a completely serviceable NFL tight end last season, maybe even above average. And Shane Zylstra was a guy that as a 3rd tight end did not hurt you.
For sure.
They might look to upgrade from that and have, a 3-headed monster kind of at tight end.
So looking at the draft, is there anything you want them to avoid? Anything that you're like, please, if anything, do not do this, Detroit Lions and Brad Holmes?
The first thing that comes to mind is don't draft a quarterback at 6. But I don't think that's going to happen because, they've kind of already tipped their hand and said, Jared Goff is our guy. The salary cap is going to explode in the next couple of years, which is perfect timing for the Lions to be able to sign him to an extension and be able to absorb it. And I also don't think he's going to get, the Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson contract.
Something more closer to Daniel Jones, which is higher than I think it should be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it will be something maybe in that ballpark if they sign him to an extension. But you got to remember that I think people think that Jared Goff is older than he is. And he's not. I mean, he's still pretty much in his prime. He's shown that he can win with weapons around him. He's been to a Super Bowl already. He's young. He's had good luck with avoiding injuries, so the mileage, isn't necessarily there. He doesn't run a lot, so he doesn't get banged up and hurt. So, I mean, if you would ask me when the Lions made that trade, if I thought Jared Goff was the quarterback of the future, I would have said absolutely not. I didn't, I had only got to see him a couple times a season, maybe in some primetime games or something.
Yep.
And, and then when I see a team give up on a quarterback, I usually just think that's a red flag. But his play last season, like, changed my mind.
Yeah, there's all kinds of opportunities because we still need to add into the backup situation, if not one, potentially two backup quarterbacks. I do hope we draft one, but I would not rule out us either trading for somebody else's backup or still signing a free agent like Teddy Bridgewater.
And they'll see after the draft, did they address backup quarterback or not? Did they draft a Hendon Hooker later, or Thompson from UCLA, who's another later round, I think, development quarterback who I could totally see the Lions taking, and I'd be very happy with if they got him in the 6th round. I've seen him go 6th, 7th round.
Like you, I don't want the Lions to take a quarterback early. I really don't. I don't think that fits the thing. But here's the thing. What if somehow, some way, Anthony Richardson falls to the number 6 spot? Because while he might have the lowest floor, he has the highest ceiling of those top 4 quarterbacks. I said there's a slight chance, a sliver of a chance, the Lions could actually draft him at 6 if he's sitting there. Not that I'm saying I want that to happen, but do you think there's a chance?
I think there's a chance, yeah. The Lions could just view this number 6 pick as just a completely bonus pick, which it is, essentially. I mean, when you made that trade with the Rams, you were expecting this pick to be in the 20s. And you were expecting your own pick to be at 6, maybe.
Right, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And it turned out the exact opposite. So, I mean, a lot of times teams, when they have those, what they consider bonus or free picks, that's when you swing for the fences. And maybe they do that. I'm not convinced that they'll do that, but it could also depend on whether they are successful at having a trade down option. If they're out on Carter, if they're out on Tyree Wilson, are they okay with sitting at 6 and taking a corner, or they want to swing for the fences with Anthony Richardson, maybe even Will Levis, I guess, at 6. I still think Will Levis is. I predicted this, and my reasoning on this, I said Will Levis would be the number 1 pick, was solely based on the thing that Carolina's new head coach Frank Reich, in all of his coaching years in the NFL, has never coached a running quarterback.
Interesting perspective.
He's always had pocket passers. The NFL comparison is Josh Allen, but I think that's way, way premature.
I agree with that.
I mean, it's just size and all that. But so it'll be interesting to see how the quarterbacks go.
Well, there's so many more variables in front of the Lions this year than there were last year, because we were only at number 2. Now we're at 6. But now there's multiple quarterbacks who will go before the Lions, where last year there weren't going to be any in the top 10.
Yeah. And just sitting there, I mean, obviously the best case scenario, to me, is trade back, acquire more assets, get one of the players that you still want a couple picks later. Maybe those assets give you the ammunition to trade up from 18. I think there's more moving parts in the top 10 this year in the NFL, even if teams just stayed where they were, if there was no trades.
I would agree, because there's so much flexibility and variability with the quality of players coming out this year.
Yeah, and you've gotten to the point where most general managers, at least the good ones, do not necessarily draft for need anymore. They draft the best athlete in the team. Even if you have a hole at guard and there's a guard there, but you have this linebacker you have graded way higher, you take the linebacker and then you sign a free agent guard that you can plug in that spot for a year and then hope to get a guard next year or in the next round of the draft or whatever.
I still remember one year Mike Shanahan had a glaring need at wide receiver. So he took a wide receiver late in the 1st round, and he said he drafted based on need, which he didn't normally do. That receiver did not work out, and he said, that's the last time I'm going to draft just based on need. I'm taking the best player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can fill needs in free agency. You can fill holes that way. And rookies, you have a good idea, hopefully, of who they are, but you don't know. And you, like you said, you're drafting on that ceiling.
So other things to avoid, I don't want the Lions to draft somebody that's got character issues or work ethic issues. I think most Lions fans agree with that. Mm-hmm. I'm hesitant on trading up just because it would take a lot of our resources away if we were to move up from 6.
Yeah.
But Any other thoughts on what you think the Lions might do? I think they're going to go defense with the first 2 picks in the first round.
I think so. It depends on, like I said, best player available. But if they're drafting for need, if they're drafting for fits, defense is obviously where they can upgrade their roster. I've seen a lot of people mocking Peter Skoronski, the guard from Northwestern, to the Lions at 18. I've seen a lot of mock drafts that have him go way higher than that, and some teams that have him going in the top 10.
I've heard at least one offensive lineman might go in the top 5.
It would be good. If there's 2 quarterbacks there at number 6, that's not necessarily as good for trading down. But if an offensive tackle or somebody goes in the top 5, then somebody else has fallen in, and somebody else might think that, there's value at 6 for this person.
Well, this draft is going to be very interesting. There's going to be lots of moves, lots of changes, I'm sure, with people trading up, trading down. Anything that you're most looking forward to, or any bold predictions you'd like to share before we get out of here?
I don't know. Well, the Levis one was it's unlikely to come true, but it was just my weird prediction, I guess. That Frank Reich would like Levis because he fits his style more than other quarterbacks. It'll be completely interesting to see what the Panthers do at number 1.
You don't think Bryce Young's a lock?
The only reason I don't think that Bryce Young is a lock is just because of the obviously not the knock that everybody has on him, which is his size. Do I believe that that's a thing? I mean, I don't know. Look at the career that Russell Wilson's had in the NFL. Last year aside.
Of course. Yep. No, but a great career up until then.
And so I don't know that that's the biggest knock in the world. He played in more of a pro-style offense, so I like that. That's another thing that Levis has going for him. He played in a pro-style offense every year, and everybody points out to his stats being worse last year, but that team lost like everybody.
Well, look at the talent he was around, right? Look at his offensive line compared to the Ohio State and Alabama offensive lines, as well as skill position players. So something could even be said for a player who doesn't have that in their system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In his junior year, when he had a better team around him, and then a lot of those players left, he was phenomenal. That's when people were talking about him being the number 1 overall pick maybe next year or this year. So, but
I don't have any bold predictions. Well, I mean, the boldest is I think Bijan Robinson is gone before 18. If he's there at 18, I will be very surprised.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I've seen some mock drafts. Some of the prognosticators have had, the Bears taking him at 9, the Eagles taking him at 10. And I think that's probably about as high as he would go.
Well, and if you draft a running back in the top 10, you're paying them a significantly higher amount of money, and therefore it doesn't make as much sense either.
Right. Yeah. Waiting for him later, getting him at 18.
That would be the sweet spot.
Much better value and everything. So if that happened, I would be completely cool with that. I think that the Lions offense would just be phenomenal with him there.
I think Lions fans are hoping that General Manager Brad Holmes has been listening to them, because while the NFL says one thing, many Lions fans seem to want Bijan Robinson, even though we already have a pretty solid running back room. We've talked about it, and we want to kind of take it to another level, and that could happen.
But I think you have to look at DeAndre Swift as somebody who's just here for this year and then is gone.
And there's rumors that we might trade him.
I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, if they drafted Bijan Robinson, I wouldn't be shocked at all if they traded him during the draft for a pick, or even afterwards for a pick next year.
Probably wouldn't get a whole lot, but you could probably get something, a third or a fourth, maybe a fourth.
Yeah, I think you could get a fourth, maybe third, depending on the team. I mean, he's still a productive back, and at worst is a very, very good third down receiving back who can be a big weapon for a creative offensive coordinator. Yeah, I think getting Bijan Robinson at some point in the first round would kind of help alleviate that loss of Jameson Williams for 6 games, in that he's such a very good receiver. He has already demonstrated that that's something he can do and do very, very well. And even at times lined up in the slot, and people see him as being able to do that in the NFL. You motion him out into the slot, get him on a linebacker, and that's not a fair matchup.
Well, and that's actually my theory on how the Jameson Williams thing affects the NFL draft for the Lions is I don't think they draft a wide receiver earlier, but I think it increases the chance that they maybe draft another playmaker on the offense, which could be Bijan Robinson, could be a tight end, just to put another playmaker out there to help fill part of the void. But then when the void comes back, you're not pushing somebody else down on the depth chart.
Yeah, now you have a built-in strength. You hope you have a built-in strength, and then you have another strength coming when Jameson Williams comes and adds another dimension to that offense.
Well, now we're close enough to the draft that people are counting it down by the hours to start this thing out. So why don't we wrap the thing up here? James, thanks so much for joining the show and sharing all that insight.
No problem. Thank you.
And thank you folks so much for tuning in. Please subscribe to Not the Same Old Lions podcast to get alerts about new episodes. Also follow the show on Twitter at Matt Soltesiak. You can also check it out on YouTube. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.